Hello everyone, I'm very excited about today's webinar. We are going to be discussing UBO identification, combining company ownership data with graph technology. So with that, let's get started. So first, I will let Stefan introduce himself.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Stephen Abbott Pugh. I'm the head of technology for OpenOwnership. Back to you, Jean.
And as for myself, my name is Jean. I'm one of the co-founders of Linkurious, where I'm in charge of the sales team. First, a quick word about Linkurious. The company itself was founded in 2013. We have two offices, one in France and the other in the US. Today, we are a team of 50 plus employees, and we are serving more than 4,000 analysts who on a daily basis are using Linkurious Enterprise to conduct advanced investigations. We are partnering with organizations such as Neo4j, Microsoft, Deloitte, Dataiku, PwC, and Capgemini. And we have more than 100 clients throughout the world. Among those clients are institutions such as Zurich Insurance, His Majesty's Revenues and Customs, Dun & Bradstreet, RIA, Money Transfer, and more. So here is the agenda for today's webinar. It will consist of three parts. First, we'll discuss why leveraging external data about company ownership is important. Then we will dive into combining Linkurious Enterprise and OpenOwnership to better assess risks. And finally, we will do a bit of a demo showcasing in practice the combination of Linkurious Enterprise and OpenOwnership. So that's it for the agenda, and now let's get started. So first, why is leveraging external data about company ownership so important? There are really a number of reasons for that. Let me talk about company ownership data and risks. First, financial institutions collect data about their clients, including what companies they are connected to, in order to assess third-party credit, fraud, and other risks. And this data, it includes what companies a client is connected to via directorship positions or as a shareholder. Of course, it's very simple when you are only inquiring about what a given client is directly connected to, but there can be indirect connections because a client, a company, or an individual can be connected indirectly to more companies, of course. And this is where it gets complicated. It gets complicated because opaque corporate structures can be used for legitimate purposes. Of course, and I want to make that very clear, there are legitimate uses, I guess, for complex corporate structures. But let's be honest, it can also be used for nefarious purposes. Here are some examples. So, for example, it's possible to create a web of company structures to mask oneself's ownership and evade sanctions. You are a sanctioned person, maybe you don't want to do business directly with a company that you control directly, and you're going to set up a bunch of intermediaries or proxies to obfuscate your ownership. Opaque corporate structures can also be used in fraud, it can be used in tax evasion, or it can be used in corruption. In corruption, for example, a politically exposed person may mask his or her interests across multiple companies to receive illegitimate funds. So these are, some of the potential problems coming with opaque corporate structures, and it makes it very important to understand those corporate structures. And now I want to talk a little bit about why external data can help enhance the information that you can have about a client. Here we can see two organizations. One is controlling the other. So you have Mom Corp, which is being controlled by Acme Inc. And let's say that this information is coming from an internal database. within my company's database, I know that these two organizations are actually linked to one another. But if I only have access to this internal database, I may risk losing sight of some potential risks. And let's see how access to an external database can help spot those risks. So here we are looking at the connections between these two entities. And I can see that Acme Inc. Is connected to Mr. Smith. And that's also part of my internal database. But now, when I bring up some information coming from an external data source, I may see that Mr. Smith is actually linked to this company and this company, these two new companies, Cyberdyne and Nakatomi Corp. And both of these companies are associated with Mr. Zukov and Mr. Gamian. So I started off with this entity, and this other entity, all based on my internal database. But when I'm bringing into the equation external information, I'm able to spot new information. And of course, maybe these two individuals are actually known bad actors. Maybe they are politically exposed persons, or maybe they are on a sanctions list. And if so, knowing that my client is indirectly connected to these bad actors is going to change how I will perceive the risk of doing business with my client. Because if I'm doing business with that client, I'm potentially also doing business with those persons, which is a problem. And that's really how mixing internal data and external information can help enhance the information about a client and spot risks that would otherwise go unnoticed. Of course, in practice, it's fairly difficult to mix internal and external data sources. And now I want to talk a little bit about the changes that come with that. First, information about company ownership is disparate, it's siloed, and sometimes it's simply not accessible. Secondly, combining internal and external data can bring up entity resolution changes. To put it very simply, it's not trivial to figure out whether person A from data source X and person B from data source Y are one and the same person. What all that means is that in practice, there's a gap between having access to relevant external data about ownership and being able to effectively use it in your anti-financial crime processes. So with this intro, I want to discuss a little bit how to tackle that challenge. And today we are going to view how combining Linkurious Enterprise and OpenOwnership can help better assess risks. And with that, I'm going to leave the floor to Stephen.
Thank you, Jean. So my organization, OpenOwnership, there's some information about us on the screen right now. We're helping to drive a global shift towards having more transparency over who owns and controls companies, or that field is also known as beneficial ownership transparency. So there's a huge amount of change happening in this area, and because of a lot of the corruption risks and sanctions challenges, anti-money laundering rules, and everything that Jean mentioned before, more and more countries are improving how they collect and publish beneficial ownership data, including legislating for some of the use cases or some of the problems that we've seen in the last 10 years. And we're helping them to implement those changes and to make sure that they can produce high quality beneficial ownership data at the end of that process, so that they can use the data to tackle some of the issues that they're looking at in their country. So the way we do that is my team, we're a not-for-profit organization, and we work with around about 40 countries all over the world, and we help to support them at all stages of implementing their beneficial ownership reforms, whether that be helping with the legislation or with the forms to collect the data, the systems that they use, and eventually, hopefully, the data publication. And the way we do that is by creating a number of tools and resources that can help them to produce really high quality data. One of those is the Beneficial Ownership Data Standard, which we've been updating and developing for the last 5 years. And what we do there is we offer an open standard for any countries to adopt. I'm happy to say that there's a number of countries that have adopted it and use it, including Nigeria, which actually launched their new register today. And behind the scenes, the data there is collected in line with the Beneficial Ownership Data Standard. We offer that openly. It's a standard that's also been approved by the UK government. We're really excited about other countries that are implementing it at the moment. To prove the value of having that better quality data, we also offer a range of open source tooling from a visualization library, so you can draw diagrams of any data that's collected in line with our standard. And we also have data review tools, sample analysis that can help people to find risks, and lots of other tools to help people. And we run something that we call the Open Ownership Register, which collects beneficial ownership data from multiple countries and shows how you can use the data in line with our data standard to follow ownership chains across different national borders and wherever they lead. So I want to just talk quickly about why that's important and why we need to have more data in a standardized formats to help people with the use cases that we were discussing earlier on. So we know that people have a huge challenge using beneficial ownership data. As Jean mentioned, often it's either not accessible or cannot be used because of the poor data quality, it's out of date. All of these things are happening. We know that a survey carried out in 2021 by the Financial Action Task Force actually found beneficial ownership data to be the most problematic of all fields, causing friction around cross-border payments. And since then, they've gone on to actually tighten what they ask countries to do and to improve the rules and the recommendations that they have around beneficial ownership. So we hope that in the years to come, there will be more and better data coming from lots of different countries. So obviously, the important thing is when you have that better quality data, it's very, very useful to have tools like Linkurious Enterprise in order to understand them, to set up alerts, to analyze the networks of information that you can pull together, where you can add beneficial ownership data in, thanks to the kind of work that we're doing. Now, what we know is that in lots of cases, people need that information, need it to be more up to date so they can carry out investigations. As I said, right now, beneficial ownership data is causing a huge amount of friction around anti-money laundering checks, know your customer checks, customer due diligence, etc. And in lots of cases, there are great complications in terms of connecting data from multiple sources, following chains that lead through jurisdictions that perhaps don't have all their data public, and also understanding things around direct beneficial ownership data and also indirect structures. So you can see there's some examples here that tend to come up classically that people want to use better quality data to identify. So whether there's a complex structure, and our data can help you to work out how many layers it takes to get to an ultimate beneficial owner. Whether there are registration agents, so particular addresses, obviously, that you want to look up where there's issues, and where you might want to identify issues where the beneficial owners or the directors are from particular jurisdictions, or whether you want to understand if they are related to multiple companies. So we see, for example, with one of the countries we work with, Latvia, they have an automatic risk-based approach when you register a company, and they say, is this person already a director of more than 5 companies, which not very many people are. So maybe if they are, we'll have an additional check to look at that person. I'm happy to say that Latvia is also implementing the beneficial ownership data standard. So, so there's lots of different reasons and lots of different people who need better quality beneficial ownership data. And that's what we're trying to help with. And that's why we're really excited about doing work with Linkurious on helping use their tools and to demonstrate exactly how you can trace some of these complex connections, visualize them and understand what is going on. Now, the project that we've worked on recently between OpenOwnership, Linkurious, and the Open Sanctions team to demonstrate what we're talking about here, to demonstrate the need to connect these multiple sources, is called Open Screening. And there's a link that will have been shared with you, so you can go and check out Open Screening yourself. It's a free tool that pulls together beneficial ownership data from ourselves, company ownership data, sanctions data from Open Sanctions. They pull together dozens and dozens of sanctions lists that appear in, in PDF or XML in various different places, and produce high quality data so that you can see the people who are sanctioned, who they're connected to, which addresses they are associated with, and also which companies they're associated with. Now, what we know is over the last year, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, especially, sanctions-related beneficial ownership checks have become more and more complex. You need to have data that's up to date. You need to have accurate information. You need to understand the levels of ownership so that you can know which parts of the company structure are subject to different rules from the UK, the EU, and the US. So what this tool allows you to do is you can go in, again, like I said, it's free for anyone to use, and you can search for any individual who's appearing in the beneficial ownership data or in the sanctions list. And then you can use Linkurious's free tools to show why it's important to have those multiple data sources all working together to build up an accurate but detailed web of information relating to that person. We're very excited about this project, very keen to hear from people who've used it. And also we're saying that the more data is produced in a standardized format or in line with our data standard, the easier it becomes to have richer and richer beneficial ownership data be used in a tool like Open Screening. Now I want to hand back to Jean.
Thank you so much, Steven. So now let's talk a little bit about how Linkurious Enterprise can help detect and investigate financial crime networks. So there are really three main components, I guess, to the product that come together in that journey. First, there's a graph visualization UI that helps conduct investigations, quickly visualize the context around an entity of interest, and figure out what's the situation and make the right decision. For example, figure out whether a client is suspicious or not, and decide to terminate an account or not. We also provide an alerts and case management functionality. It helps detect and automate the detection, I guess, of suspicious cases. And finally, all of that comes with advanced collaboration features that make it possible to deploy Linkurious Enterprise within large organizations and work as a team effectively. So that's it for Linkurious Enterprise. Now I want to talk a little bit about what putting that in action within one organization looks like. And for this, I'm going to use an architecture blueprint that has been put together by a partner of ours, Aptitude Global. So here you can see how to approach the challenge of integrating internal data and external data. And once again, this has been developed by our partner, Aptitude Global. And you can see on the left that there are internal data, KYC information, transactional data. All of that is flowing via the Kafka to a data lake. And then you can also bring into the equation external data sources, such as OpenOwnership, which gives you great information about beneficiary ownership information. And you can also bring other data sources, such as Open Sanctions. Open Sanctions being able to provide coverage for sanctioned entities, but also politically exposed person and more. All of that can be combined in data lake. And then our partner, Aptitude, is using Sensing, which is an entity resolution technology to actually identify the connections across these different data sources, figure out where different records are actually describing the same entity. And you can see that as via sensing this information, the resolved entities is actually stored in a Neo4j graph database optimized for the storage and analysis of graph data. And at the same time, the source data, the unresolved entities, if you will, is also stored in this Neo4j graph database. At the end of the day, this graph database is connected to Linkurious Enterprise, which acts as the front end for the teams of investigators and compliance analysts that want to leverage this information for their investigations and for their compliance processes. So this is, in practical terms, how to effectively mix internal data and external data into a coherent whole that creates a financial crime knowledge graph that can then be exploited via Linkurious Enterprise. So we've talked about the architecture. We've talked about a lot of things in theoretical terms. Now I would like to give you a bit of a demo showcasing in action the combination of Linkurious Enterprise and OpenOwnership. So for this purpose, we are going to use Linkurious Enterprise connected to a database populated with data from OpenOwnership. And together in this demo, we are going to see two things. First, we will conduct an investigation, starting with an identified entity of interest, and we'll try to figure out information and context around this entity of interest. And then, in a more proactive fashion, we will leverage graph analytics to identify across the entire database potentially suspicious entities. Okay, so bear with me one second. I'm going to switch now to the Linkurious Enterprise UI, which hopefully you can currently see. So this is the Linkurious Enterprise UI. I'm connected to a space, a financial crime space, which is really a place where me and my colleagues can work together around investigations and share assets such as investigation recipes in the form of coordinate plates and custom actions, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few seconds. Right now, what I want to do is conduct an investigation once again, and I'm going to click on New Visualization to open up the Linkurious Enterprise UI. I'm interested in an entity called IVA Cleaning Ltd, and I'm going to pretend that this is an entity that I'm starting to do business with as a bank, and I want to get an understanding for what this entity is connected to figure out whether doing business with this entity is risky or not. So I'm looking it up on Linkurious Enterprise. And very quickly, I can see a bunch of information show up. So I understand that this entity is a British entity. It's been incorporated in 2021. It has a registration number and more. If I want to, I can use the Linkurious Enterprise custom actions to look up this entity in third-party data sources. So for example, here, I'm going to look it up on OpenOwnership. Okay. So this is actually the raw document, if you will, that you can find online about IVA Cleaning Ltd. You can see, the name of the beneficial owner. You can see a bunch of information really about this company. But this, in and of itself, this static document, doesn't really tell me about the context surrounding this organization, and it's not enough for me to make the right decision, I guess. So I'm going back now to Linkurious Enterprise, and I'm going to focus my attention right now on this little 2 next to IVA Cleaning. It means that this entity has 2 relationships with other entities. Going to double click now, and I'm going to retrieve those relationships. And I can quickly see Miss Ivanka Todorova Tacheva, which and whom is apparently the owner of this business. I can, drill down further, identify that this person is connected to an address. This address seems to be connected to a few other persons. And this person, for example, is connected to another company. So really, as you can see, we are not looking at just one loan individual, I guess, one loan beneficiary owner, which would be Miss Ivanka Todorova Tacheva. But we are looking at potentially a network, a complex network of entities surrounding that company. So I'm going to go back to the initial starting point, the name of the company, and I'm going to investigate those indirect relationships. This time, in order to speed up the investigation process, I'm going to use what we call a query template, which is really a way to automate an investigation workflow. And I'm going to call that template by clicking here on Find Indirect Connections. Okay, so we see, in just a couple of clicks, a lot of those entities that are apparently associated with EVA cleaning. In the background, what has happened is that we have triggered the query template that I mentioned. I can view here what it looks like in practice from a data scientist or developer perspective, I guess. So it's really a piece of code, something that I can totally set up on my own, and which can translate the business logic of an investigation workflow in a graph query language. Among the type of query templates that can be leveraged within the context of an investigation are the ability to look up on a map an address, find its lat long coordinates, for example, the ability to find the shortest path between two entities, or the path of the ultimate beneficiary owners of an entity. And we'll see more about that in a few minutes. But let's go back to the Linkurious Enterprise UI for a moment. I can see that there are a few entities where there are potentially extra relationships to extract. So I'm going to do that. Okay, zooming out. Here I can see some extra connections, which I'm going to also extract. Okay, and now I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Just for context, this is our starting point, EVA Cleaning Ltd. So now we are looking at all the entities that are associated with this one entity. I can zoom out on a particular aspect of the graph. For example, I can see here Miss Maya Terzian. I can see a lot of information about her. I can see that she is connected to an address entity here, and she's connected to an organization here, and I can get more information about that organization. If I click on a particular relationship, I can get more information about that relationship. Here, for example, we have an end date and a start date for the relationship between this Maya Terzian and Cibita Limited. Okay, zooming out. There's definitely something weird and interesting going on with this EVA Cleaning Ltd. It's part of a larger network. I can get more insights about that network by bringing up Linkurious Enterprise's filter panel. So we see, for example, that contains 3 companies, which are now highlighted in red. It spans across 10 persons. And among those persons, we have 5 British persons, someone from Bulgaria, so that would be our starting point, I guess. Someone from Lithuania, 2 persons from Latvia, and 1 person from Russia. So Definitely suspicious or at least unusual network, both by its size, I guess, but also by the fact that there are some folks that are outside of the UK. Okay, I can get more information about what's going on by looking up some of those entities online. For example, we see a few mentions of this Mr. Artem Terzian, which apparently is mentioned 3 times across different sources. And I'm going to look him up online. Once custom action. Okay, so when I look on this person online, I quickly find an article related to COVID loan fraud. And apparently, this person is a known fraud and fraudster and money launderer. So what's interesting here is that with this starting point, EVA Cleaning Ltd, I've been able to leverage open ownership data to get more information about the associates of this organization and uncover some potentially very risky individuals. So if, as a company, you were to have access to, you were to do business with any member of this network, this person, for example, or this company, if you were to integrate the open ownership data and leverage Linkurious Enterprise to make sense of all of that, you would be quickly able to uncover all of these relationships that we are currently looking at and leverage that to make the right decisions in your money laundering or anti-fraud processes. So we have uncovered something suspicious, something interesting together. Now, if I want to, I can save that. I'm just going to go ahead and name that based on the name of the company. That visualization that we have created together, we can publish it, we can export it, and we can also share it with colleagues. All of that in a couple of clicks to work collaboratively on this investigation. But right now, I want to go back to the Linkurious Enterprise dashboard and talk a little bit about how to leverage the software to be a little bit more proactive about the investigation process. Now I'm going to talk about the alerts functionalities in Linkurious Enterprise, and we are going to view together how it's possible to leverage that to automatically detect suspicious activities and close the gap between something nefarious going on and taking action more rapidly. So I'm clicking on alerts. I'm going to bring up what we call the alerts dashboard. So this is what you would see, what you would look at as a developer or data scientist. And then I would show you what the analysts would have a look at. So this dashboard here, it's all about creating, defining various patterns that then will be automated by Linkurious Enterprise to generate some cases. So let's look at this pattern. It's called suspicious scope. I'm going to click on edit. So we see the name of the pattern. And it's based on 3 models. What are models? These models are basically rules that are designed to uncover suspicious patterns within the graph. So we have a model that's called long ownership chain. It's going to flag entities that are owned by via complex ownership chain. There's also a model to identify directors associated with multiple other companies. We can have a look at what it looks like in practice. So basically, this is based on a graph query language called Cypher. You can see that we are looking for companies that are connected to persons that are in turn connected to companies. And we want to identify, find out directors, companies that are connected to to more than 3 companies via this type of relationship. So this is an example of a model. Here we have one last model called foreign directors, and we are basically trying to identify companies where there are more than two nationalities among the directors. And what's interesting is that Linkurious Enterprise combines these various models. It's going to identify the companies that match any of these models. And it's going to create a case every time something matches one of the models. Linkurious Enterprise is smart enough to deduplicate the results across these various models, meaning that if a particular company is flagged by more than one model, there will be a single case that will be created. So what that means is that, bottom line, as an analyst, you would look at a lesser number of cases, and it's going to make your job that much easier. Okay, so we have seen how the alerts in Linkurious Enterprise can be set up. Now let's look at what it looks like from the perspective of an analyst, someone in charge of doing some triage work. So this is the case view, where you can see the various cases that have been generated by the alerts. So I can do some slicing and dicing, maybe based on a field of interest, such as the country or on the name, based on the person who was assigned to the cases, or based on the case status. I can see the list of results. And for example, for this result, there's an ID, and we know that it has been flagged by the long ownership chain model. You can see that some of the entities that have been flagged because they have very complex corporate structures are actually maybe not that suspicious. I mean, that's Goldman Sachs, definitely complex corporate structures, corporate structure, but probably safe to do business with. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to open another entity, another case. This one related to CRV Capitals. So this would be a company in Latvia. I'm going to click here. I can see a bunch of information about the case, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Open Case. Okay, here I can add some comments related to the investigation. I can change the assignment of the case. I can change the status of the case. But I'm mostly interested right now in figuring out who are the UBOs of this entity. And for this, I'm going to once again call a query template. This one specialized in the identification of UBOs. So I'm clicking here on queries, clicking on Find UBO. And just in a couple of seconds, I'm able to see all the UBOs of this entity. As you can see, it's fairly complex. So this is the starting point. This company is owned in turn by this company. It's also apparently owned by this company, which is owned by this company. And across these different companies, you have a bunch of individuals that pop up. So this is an example of how we can leverage the OpenOwnership data and graph analytics to identify interesting, potentially suspicious pattern. Obviously, I don't know much about this one company in particular. Maybe there's absolutely nothing wrong going on. I don't have any reason to believe something nefarious is going on. But Linkurious Enterprise can help me identify the context, the suspicious connections around this company nonetheless, and can act as a starting point for a potential investigation. Okay, so now we have seen how Linkurious Enterprise can help both detect, but also investigate interesting situations and suspicious entities. And what's very important, very interesting, is how leveraging this data from OpenOwnership really helps expand our understanding of any individual, any company, and spot risks that would otherwise go unnoticed. So I guess that's it for the demo right now. And I'm going to switch back to the deck now. Okay. And with that, I guess we can start the Q&A section of today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Jean, Stephen. So just as a reminder, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and submit your questions in that Q&A section of your screen. So let's get started with the first question here. It says, what other data sources like OpenOwnership can be used to get a better picture of financial crime risk?
There are a lot of data providers out there providing information, especially information about company ownership or sanctioned entities or politically exposed persons. Maybe something to mention is Open Sanctions. We are working fairly closely with them, and we've partnered with them for the Open Screening project. And they provide a unique database covering a lot of sanctioned entities, which is something very important if you want to implement a robust anti-financial crime setup.
I'd also mention there's other organizations that we're all interested in partnering with, like people like the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. So when companies apply to get a legal entity identifier, which lots of financial organizations have to have, and a growing number of companies are required to have, they have to report who their parent company is and who their ultimate parent company is. And so that is a very interesting data set that does not identify the beneficial owners, but is also another layer that you can put on top of company ownership or beneficial ownership data to find out more about the companies that you're looking into.
All right. Next question. What's the future of open ownership and public UBO registries after the Court of Justice of the European Union invalidated a provision of the 5th EU Anti-Money Laundering Directive that guaranteed public access to information on companies' real owners?
Thank you. That's a good question. So, yes, there was a ruling last November from the European Court. For people who haven't followed how this has progressed across the European Union, in the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, beneficial ownership registers were created, but they were only available to people who had legitimate interest. The 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive said that they should be opened up to the public. And this court ruling says that maybe went too far in terms of privacy, in terms of invading privacy. But what's very interesting for us is that it's still kind of being worked out what the reaction to this ruling is. Countries like France, Latvia, Slovakia have all kept their data open. They have said this beneficial ownership data is not only useful for us for anti-money laundering purposes, but we need it. We have to have it because of the sanctions enforcement that we're trying to do. And we also, some countries like Slovakia use it to help in their public procurement processes. So what we're seeing right now is a debate about the 6th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, where what is being debated currently at the European Commission is giving journalists and civil society organizations access to all EU member state beneficial ownership registers, which is actually kind of in some ways better than some of them had before, because some countries were very cautious about allowing journalists access to their data. So things are still being debated and being worked out kind of legally around this. But what I would say is that despite that ruling, there's still an international recognition everywhere that better quality data is needed by governments, by those with legitimate interest, by the kind of bodies that have to enforce sanctions, that have to check into businesses. So even if in some cases the data isn't public, it's still important to have better quality data, more up-to-date data, and more information available to people. So we are working in multiple jurisdictions across the whole range. In some places, so for example, Nigeria is registered to launch today. All the data is open, public, everyone can use it. In the UK, the data is open, public, everyone can use it. But in other places, they are realizing that they want to start off with to have better quality data for government, for police, for others. And they are structuring it, but keeping it internal. So we're working with people on the legislation, but it's ultimately up to each individual country to decide what approach they take. The final point is that I would say that if you choose to keep your data internal within the government or limited to certain users, those users should have the resources that they need in order to use it. Maybe they'll need more funding, more manpower, whatever. But that's an important thing if people are going to collect the data, to make sure there's enough people to use it.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Next question here. Does Linkurious have the capability to send the Google query results to a private internal AI trained model?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's something that we will need to double check, and we'll probably reply in writing.
Great. Next question is, how easy is it to combine multiple data sources in a graph database? How do you structure this data to make it work together?
So there are various ways to do that. There's what I would call a simple approach, which is really to import the data as such, I guess, within the graph database, and automatically you are going to see connections between records pop up. Maybe two persons with a similar name will be sharing a phone number, an address, things of that nature. I think it will, it's a starting point, and it's definitely something that's easy to implement. And I guess graph technology is great to deliver on that. What we also see in practice is that sometimes our clients want something which is cleaner. They want to avoid duplicates, and then that's why we have partnered with Aptitude Global to provide this solution that combines Linkurious Enterprise, but also Neo4j and Sensing, an entity resolution technology, to effectively resolve entities, limit the number of duplicates, and basically improve drastically on the quality of the data. So it's something a bit more complex that we can help anyone interested with. And it's definitely something that we would recommend if you want to really have something production grade, I guess, in terms of integration between internal and external data sources.
All right. The next question here, do you have any concrete examples of real life scenarios where open source data and graph technology has helped professionals to uncover new insights?
I think something that comes to mind right now is maybe the Panama Papers investigation that was conducted a few years ago now. So it combined a data leak, I guess one of the biggest in history, with external data sources. I mean, open source data sources. And by combining these different things, the ICJ team was able to uncover evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and more. So that's something that's fairly public, I guess. But we also have clients that are basically replicating that, for example, in the context of tax evasion, to detect fraud and money laundering behaviors.
All right, thank you. So let's see, there's some questions rolling in here. How do you handle situations where the ultimate beneficial owner of a company is trustees, given that information about the beneficiaries of trustees is rarely accessible in public databases?
That's a very good question from Rustam. So it's worth saying that our beneficial ownership data standard can allow you to capture beneficial ownership data on trusts as well. So on companies, trusts, arrangements, partnerships, because you're right, ultimately what has been seen in the last year has been reported by various task forces that are looking at the Russian situation, is that if we look at those high profile cases, a lot of Russian oligarchs have moved their money into trusts or moved their beneficial ownership assets and everything into the names of trusts, or they've moved into the names of their kids. So what I would say is happening there is that the Financial Action Task Force has two recommendations, Recommendation 24 on companies and Recommendation 25 on trusts, and they are revising both of them. The Recommendation 25 on trust is a bit behind companies, but they have been talking for the last year and a half about actually how they are requiring more and more high quality data to be collected on companies, and they think that they will change what they require on trusts to be aligned with that. So some of the language is on their website, but it seems likely that more trust transparency is going to be required. And for people who are looking to capture that data, you can use our data standard. I'd mention here, for an example, we're working with the South African government. They have 5 separate beneficial ownership registers. They have one for companies, non-profits, trusts. They have one for government organizations they have to do. So to combine all of them and to build up a strong database of all of the interests that are related to a particular South African individual, they are hoping to have the data structured in the same way, even if it's not public, to have that data structure so that they can link the individuals back. So the way that our data standard works is we have a statement-based model. So you have statements about people, entities, and the ownership or control between them. And so as long as you can identify one person the same way, be it by same identifier or address, birth date, common aspects, then it's possible to link all it together. But you're right that trusts are currently a kind of weak link in a lot of the ownership chains around the world, because they're treated differently for companies, and they were always treated as often more secretive because they were supposed to be private between individuals and their families, but they are being abused in multiple ways.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Another question here. Are you able to give any further details about how the director's entity resolution works? What happens if it forms an incorrect link between directors from registers in different countries?
I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of details regarding the entity resolution process done for this particular demo, as I wasn't involved in that. What happens if it forms an incorrect link between directors from registers in different countries? Just a quick comment about this part. Within Linkurious Enterprise, you can interact with the data. You can edit it. You can add new information, remove things. So when we have clients dealing with entity resolution, typically it's the machine that's making predictions about whether things are rated or not. But it's always useful to have a human in the loop type of process. And for example, as an analyst, you can flag a particular relationship as non-relevant, or you can add an extra link between two entities that were not detected as similar, but which in practice are. So you can add that human feedback, I guess, to improve the data.
Great.
And just one quick other note, best practice that we have seen is also to showcase the level of confidence in the entity resolution process. Typically, it's something that can be expressed via statistic. and you can use that to map this data point with the size or with the color of the relationship to very quickly help the analyst figure out whether this is a high confidence prediction or not.
All right, thanks, Jean. I think we have time for just one more question. So, is there a possibility to conduct any single entity analysis or relevant documentation upload, etc., within the Linkurious platform? So, for example, for the possibility of zooming in detail on a specific entity.
Great question. So there are a couple of ways to do that. During the demo, I showcased the custom actions, where you can basically pivot from the Linkurious Enterprise UI and to another app. Specifically, I think I showcased the OpenOwnership website. Basically, we're looking at the director, and then we looked at this same entity within the OpenOwnership website with a more entity-specific layout. So this would be one example, but you can very much extend that. You can also pivot from the Linkurious Enterprise UI and into an internal bespoke application, for example. So this would be another way of having more of a single entity view of things. And we also have a system of plugins where you can basically create your own UI that's integrated within Linkurious Enterprise, and it's possible with this plugin architecture to create such a single entity analysis layout.
All right, so we're almost running out of time, so we'll go ahead and stop there. We do want to thank you all for tuning in, and thanks again, Stephen, for joining us today. If you have any other questions or you want to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, either Linkurious or OpenOwnership. And this webinar has been recorded, so we will be sending that out to everyone as soon as possible. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.